Happy Valentine's Day, big community members. Well, it's another edition of Parenting and Mental Health. I hope, despite the fact that not a lot of people come on live, I hope a lot of you I've heard are getting a lot out of the replays of these videos. So please pass the videos on to others. Please pass on the message that we would love to have people live. I'd love to have people live with me so that I have questions to answer, and I am always open to new topics. So tonight we have our next new topic. We're going to talk about screen time. So I know that's not very Valentine's-y, so I apologize. This is probably one of the first times that I haven't really um, stuck to whatever the holiday is. And I think tonight I was just struck by coming off of the holiday season and being a parent myself, how often screen time comes into play. So, and what I mean by that is, as parents, a lot of us are working, we're taking care of kids, where some of us, I hear about, are also taking care of our parents while we're also trying to take care of our own kids. So there's a lot of things that are coming into play. And sometimes, even for ourselves, we divert to watching a movie because we're exhausted or watching a TV show. I catch myself doing that. And I always have to remind myself that watching TV isn't active recovery, that if I'm watching TV, I'm not going to come back refreshed and renewed the same way I would if I took a walk in the woods or went and exercised or did yoga or hopped in a sauna. I know no one really likes to hear this. I don't either myself. I'd love to watch a good episode of Outlander or The Witcher or Yellowstone or any of these other programs that are out there, good series. Um, however, it isn't good active recovery. We have lots of good neuroscience data that tells us that our brain doesn't shut down when we're watching TV or playing a video game or anything else. So this is as much for me as everyone else. It's for parents, it's also for kids, so this is something that I want parents to take seriously, not just as parents, but also, as adults that use screen time to recover. And also how to handle this with their kids, right? Because we've all done it. We've all been exhausted, handed our kids a tablet or turned on the TV and gotten reprieve, right? I get it. So please know that there's no judgment here. I did this as much for myself as anyone else. I wanted to look up the data. I wanted to look what research showed about screen time and get some hard facts out there for you all. So I hope this is helpful. So what do we mean by screen time? So simply put, screen time is as simple as the screen, any type of screen that you spend time on. Right now, I have screen time, right? I'm looking at a screen that's emitting light back towards me. Okay. So it is as simple as that. So that includes smartphones, tablets, TVs, video games. It doesn't matter how small the screen is or large. They all are screen time. Now, I will talk a little bit later about how not all screen time is created equal, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Um, so for yourself or any child engaged in screen time, whether they're actively the one engaged in it or they're just in the room with the screen on, it's still screen time. Sorry, that just ran into something. Okay, so I wanted to be clear about what screen time was. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the psychology behind screen use. So in 1898, there was a psychologist by the name of Edward Thorndike proposed one of the first rules of behavior, the law of effect. I know that doesn't sound shocking, and it's not. It just simply stated that rewarded actions tend to increase or be repeated, right? We all know this. We all know that if we give a dog a treat, the dog's going to come back to us. right? Because it wants another treat. So this was tested with rats in a lab, and so the rat would use a bar. So if any of you are not familiar with laboratory rats, some of the original studies were done with a rat in a cage, and they would have bars they could press to get rewards. Okay, and so if the rat pressed the bar, it would get a reward or a lever, right? And every time we check our phone, it's kind of like pressing a bar, the same way a rat pressed a bar to get a reward. Because when we check our phones, or whether it's we check our phones and we go to Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, um, any number of other social media entities, we're looking for that moment where someone's responded to us, or where we get a little tidbit of information we've been looking for, something that intrigues us, right? And we can get that instantly certainly through our smartphones and social media. We also now are on this new age where, and I was thinking about this the other day with my kids, when I grew up, we had standard, the 3 channel kind of TV. We also had cable, right? But even with cable, you had a giant guide of all these channels, right? Maybe 100 channels, maybe 50 channels, whatever. But half of them were like C-SPAN. No kid wants to watch that. C-SPAN or the Weather Channel or things, the History Channel, right? So there are all these channels that maybe kids didn't really want to watch. There was the Cartoon Network. Maybe that sounds appealing, or Disney, right? That sounds appealing, or Nickelodeon. Um, but they didn't always have great content on ever all the time. So that being said, you would scroll through the channels, and we've all been there. We remember the days, or at least as adults, we remember the days of the person that had control of the remote. And they would use the remote, they constantly press it. So think about the rat pressing the bar. They keep pressing it to finally find that thing that lights them up. And when I mean light up, I mean our neurons start firing because we're getting a reward. We finally get to that thing that gives us a reward. Well, now it's as simple as having a Fire Stick or any other type of media attached to your television, where you can immediately on demand ask exactly for you what you want, right? For what you want. And that's kind of a different world, right? So now our kids, whether it's on the TV, the smartphone, the video game console, they can get whatever they want that's appealing to them within an instant, right? YouTube's one of the biggest used social media platforms for kids. It has some great content on it and has some really awful content on it. We're going to talk about that. So every time you get on your phone, every time you get on that smartphone, you're getting a little hit of dopamine because you're getting back what you want. And so when you get that reward, so when we go back to the rats, and you can see this in the picture, and this is what I'm trying to. So if a rat got a reward every single time they pressed the bar, over time they kind of get bored with it. If you're a parent, and I'm assuming most people watching this are, we know this about our kids, right? We give them a reward every time they get a good grade, or every time potty training is a classic example. Every time our kid went potty on the potty and we gave them a reward, whether it was pee or poop, it didn't matter, right? Like we gave them a reward. Over time, it like didn't keep working. We're like, oh no, like they're not pooping on the potty. Like maybe they peed and we rewarded them for that. This is the big one. And then the reward isn't big enough. So we either have to up the reward, or we have to change the reward, or maybe we have to sometimes forget. But we did it every time. We were so good. The ability for the reward to maintain its potency falls. And that's what this first little graph is. What Thorndike found out is if the rat, when they pressed the bar, didn't get a reward every single time, but still got it several times, like enough to keep it interested, it then continually pressed the bar. So that's why the line stays up higher for longer. It was a lot harder for that rat to break the habit. So when we get on our smartphones, we may get a little burst of something that is a little dopamine hit, but not something big enough to sustain us, right? Like when we were scrolling cable and we finally found something we wanted to watch, we got a whole half an hour of it. Now it's like we might get like a couple seconds, and then that wasn't enough. We have to go to something else, then go to something else when you're trying to find what we want. So it's a lot of up and downs, which keeps us hooked longer. So every time we open our phones, we get thoroughly obsessed with it. And this unpredictable response is what's keeping us hooked, not getting something every time. And so we want to pay attention to this because this is what's happening with our kids too. So so that's what I wanted to point out about the psychology of reward. And this can be used in other areas, by the way. So if you're rewarding your kids for good behavior or brushing their teeth or good grades, vary what the reward is and the intensity of the reward. And you'll see that your kids respond more consistently to try and reach the reward if the reward shifts a little bit. Okay. So that's the psychology behind screen use. Basically, because we don't get the perfect reward every time, but we are getting a little bit of something, we go for it. We continue, and the habit becomes harder to break. So every time we turn on our phone, maybe we're hoping for that text message from that certain someone, but we don't always get it. We get a little down, right? It's a little bummed out. Then we go back and we keep going back and we keep going back. And then finally we get that text message from that certain someone. We're really excited about it. That keeps us going back to the phone a lot longer. So be aware of that going forward. Let's talk about the negative effects of screen time. So this is why I'm here, right? I want to talk about screen time. And I want to talk about the negative effects. So there was a doctor that was quoted, I think this was an American Psychological Association article that was talking about screen time and what's going on. And it basically says that not only does screen time produce negative effects, but it also steals time from doing positive things. So what are some of the negative effects? Some of the negative effects are things like poor sleep, right? So we have this person over here, exhausted. You've all been there. You can't sleep. So what do? You get on your phone. And then what happens? You stay awake longer because you're shooting light into your eyes. Your eyes respond to that. And your eyes tell your brain, it must be daylight out because I see light. And therefore, no melatonin is produced. Melatonin's what helps our body relax, calm down, and get ready for bed. If we don't create, like I've talked in my sleep hygiene presentation, if we don't create a pattern before bed, we are not going to produce enough melatonin to help us go to sleep. Okay, so poor sleep, the light emitted, right? And those blue light glasses, they're helpful, but they're not perfect. And they're not really getting rid of light the way we really need it to. We get a barrage of light, and it's not just screen time light. Although screen time light, the reason it's a problem is it's about 1,000 times more intense than a lamp. So a lamp where you have a 60-watt bulb isn't going to produce the same amount of intensity that our brain's like, whoa, it's really bright out. It must be daytime. That comes from a screen. Okay. Our lamps don't do that. So we talked about with sleep hygiene, lowering the wattage of your lamps so that when you have it on, you're reading a book, it's really dim. And that's going to help our brain to be like, oh, it's really dim. The sun must be setting or the sun must have just gone down, right? Our brains, again, have not evolved as fast as our technology has. For kids, this is a huge problem. Sorry, I keep getting up and moving. Our therapy dog Bentley decides she wants to go in and out several times tonight. So anyway, so for kids, what does that mean? That means that if you're giving a kid a screen, whether it's a TV or a tablet or a phone, to watch something or to play a game before bed, you're doing them a disservice. You're helping them stay up. Now I get it. I've been there. sometimes it's easier to give them that. And because we're so exhausted, we're like, you know what, kid, watch your show. I'm going to bed. Right. I would ask or just suggest that maybe you just save those moments for when you're on vacation, when it's not so important that the child has to get up in the morning to go to school. Because when they go to school, and I talked about this in my sleep talk, if they go to school and they don't have enough sleep, they're not learning as well. They're not interacting socially as well. They have less ability to deal with social pressures, with stress and anxiety. So when they're on vacation, you can let them sleep in and then they get the amount of sleep that they need. I won't get into keeping a consistent time to wake and sleep because that's saved for sleep hygiene. I've already talked about that. But basically, if you look at a screen right before bed, or if you wake up in the middle of the night, you grab your phone to read something or to play Sudoku or crossword because you think that's simple, it's still a screen. Get a really tiny reading lamp that doesn't have a lot of wattage and read a book. I bet you, you'll fall asleep a lot faster. Okay. So, you know what? We've got to reduce our screen time right before bed. I'll talk about what that means later. Eye strain. So you see this little guy over here, he's grabbing his eyes hurt. It's no surprise that staring at a computer for hours upon hours is bad for your eyes. The brightness of the display, coupled with the glare and the overtaxing of already tired eyes, can cause eye strain. I didn't really realize this was a thing as a parent until I had a day, it was during summer vacation, I believe, and I let my son play video games with a friend for several hours. Okay. I was doing something else, not my best parenting moment, let him play for several hours. Then we went to another friend's house who also wanted to play video games. And we did it in such a rapid succession. He played for a little while, then all of a sudden he got freaked out. He said, Mommy, my eyes are blurry. He was so scared. And we realized his eyes were blurry because the muscles in his eyes were exhausted. When you read something, your eyes actually go back and forth like this when you're reading. Imagine, just take any other muscle on your body, right? Whether it's your fist and you clench it and unclench it, do that. Try and do that for 30, 40 minutes. How long are you playing video games? Try and do this where you really clench your fist and then release over and over and over again for, I don't know, my fist is already getting tired and I've only done this for about 45 seconds. Okay. Imagine doing that for hours. That's how tired your eyes get. Yes, we build up resilience over time, but it still causes eye strain, which also can lead to migraines because then the muscles here get fatigued, other muscles in your face and on your scalp start to try and compensate. They get tired. All of that creates things like migraines, eye strain. Like also, if you're on a screen and you're looking down, you're doing this, which we all do, again, no judgment here, it causes uh, neck pain. Okay. So if you are spending these and you get these muscle aches, a lot of people have dealt with this now. These are things that chiropractors and massage therapists are dealing with on the regular. Hunched over a computer, looking down a device can strain your neck, your back, and your shoulder muscles. You hold these positions for long periods of time, you're going to experience pain and even sometimes serious muscular skeletal issues. They actually call this tech neck. Okay. So it's something that happens. And another thing that's happening, remember I talked about those little hits of dopamine that happen every time you check your phone and you get something that you want to get. Well, that little dopamine dump is something our brain wants. We get dopamine when we're happy, when we're satisfied. So we want that. Our brain wants that all the time. It thinks that's a good place to be. So when we have sugar, when we certain drugs do this, sex, there are so many other things, right? There are all sorts of things that people that do extreme sports get dopamine hits very quickly, right? All these things cause these dopamine hits. And when we check our phones, those can cause dopamine hits. Or when we're playing a video game and we get a reward. causes dopamine hit. Where we go on the TV and we are instantly allowed to watch the show we want to watch, we get a dopamine hit. And that can cause addiction. And screens are actually highly addictive. If you don't believe it, allow a toddler to watch a screen for a couple days, here and there, and then give the toddler the screen and immediately take it away from them. See how that goes. They're going to scream their head off. It's not unlike the screams you see from kids or babies that are in a hospital that are recovering from a addiction that they got from in utero. I'm not doing this to scare anybody. I mean, it's just what it is, right? So it's highly addictive. And what I'll talk about further is that addiction to screens can be detrimental in ways that we didn't really think about, right? So because you're sitting on a screen, you're kind of locked to something, you're not moving around, you're not going out and playing sports, or just walking to a friend's house, or just walking. I mean, when I was a kid and I got bored, sometimes I would just go for a walk down the street, a walk to this local pond that was down the road, and I would feed the ducks. Or I'd go walk in the woods and I'd make something up. So without, that sedentary life of sitting there playing video games, watching TV causes weight gain. There was a 2017 study that was published by the Journal of Pediatrics and said, uh, through a bunch of observational studies, there was a direct relationship between screen media exposure and increased risks of obesity. So what's that saying? Well, the behaviors of watching a screen cause us to gain weight. And coupled with that, oftentimes, especially for watching a TV show, I don't know if any of you watched the Super Bowl, there were several ads that had to do with food, right? Or depending on the time of day, depending on what type of show you're watching, the ads are geared towards the demographic that's the largest, and you're going to see those types of ads. So if a kid is watching the show, they're going to see a lot of food ads, a lot of ads for sugary cereals and candy and things like that, right? That's been going on for a long time. So exposure to these ads creates unhealthy desires for food and drink that aren't good. I definitely have experienced as a parent. My kids watched a show. Next thing I know, they're asking for some cereal or candy bar that I don't even know about. But I see it, and then when I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, we're not getting that. That's loaded with sugar. It has like zero nutritional value. And then they're mad at me, right? So here we go, full circle. I'm the bad guy because they got a hankering for something that they saw on TV. So not just weight gain, but the sedentary behavior, right? So if you start if as an adult, you start binge watching your favorite Netflix show, or your favorite Amazon Prime TV show, the chances are you're going to sit there for a long period of time. Maybe you get your favorite tasty beverage or some snacks. My guess is your snacks aren't celery and spinach. Just a guess. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay. Same thing with your kids, right? So they might be watching something. They're not going to sit there and you know, watch their YouTube, whatever, and carefully cut up a piece of lean protein and eat their broccoli. They're going to grab something easy and eat it quickly while they get to, navigate the channels or play their video game. So they're probably not eating the best of food while they're doing this. Um, you know, Another contributor to weight gain for kids is that too much of the screen time can just lead to basically less activity and less desire to be active, especially in the winter. So if your kid has a choice between going outside and shooting hoops on the basketball hoop, outside, or staying inside and playing a video game, where are they going to choose 9 times out of 10? The video game, right? It's warmer inside, it's more comfortable. They get more dopamine hits. Why would they go outside and shoot the basketball? Right? So then you have to create this barrier to push them outside. So, the Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics in 2022 reported that recreation screen media reduced intervention results resulted in a substantial increase in children's engagement in physical activity. So just a slight reduction, right? A slight intervention and allowing kids to access screens. Eventually, like, oh, I'm not going to get my screen. Okay, well, I guess I'll go outside and shoot the basketball, right? And you know what? That increased activity then helps children get the activity they need, right? Because remember, when they're in school, yes, for little kids, they might have recess, but they're mostly sitting all day long, probably just like you and me. If you have a desk job, that's what you're doing all day long. And think about what you're dying to do for a little bit is get up and move around. If you don't, you sat all day and you get home and you're tired. Why is that? Your body's gotten used to it. Your body's exhausted from sitting because screens are exhausting. So we really have to be leery of how much screen time we have and how much screen time our kids have. Um, Another Journal of American Medical Association, also referred to as JAMA, discovered that too much screen time early in life could mean cognitive issues later in childhood. This is because the functions developing in early years are easily affected by environmental influences like screens. So when a baby has screen exposure, they are challenged to process the information they're seeing on the screen as it's meant for more developed brains and older children and adults. And it's not a good challenge. What it causes is the brain to divert that energy to something to dissect this screen influence, as opposed to developing things like motor skills to speak, motor skills to eat, uh, social cues from their caregivers. That's what it's taking away from. So, when we think like, oh, they're getting challenged, no, it's not in a good way. Okay. So if I haven't scared you enough, there are yet more negative effects to screen time. Um, for kids, and again, this is something I saw in my own child, as a young child, when we would allow him to have too much screen time, he would have knockdown, drag out tantrums. Okay. Behavior problems are a real thing. The Mayo Clinic reports that kids that watch more than 2 hours of screens a day are more likely to have emotional, attentional, or social problems. Screen time reduces our ability to want to wait for rewards, right? We talked about that earlier. We get rewards all the time when we're on a screen. When we're talking to someone, we have to wait our turn. When we're playing with a friend, we don't always get to do the thing we want to do, and we have to learn how to navigate giving and taking. With a TV, we don't have to do that. With a video game, yeah, you lose every once in a while, but then you just start over and you do it again, right? Sometimes we don't get those chances with real humans. Um, so kids lose a lot of chance to learn how to navigate social behaviors, learning how to have a longer attention span when they're on screens. And furthermore, this screen time, think about the video games kids often play, even Fortnite, where they get to wear these fun costumes and the environment, like where they are, looks pretty and green. The whole job of Fortnite is to kill everybody, right? And so we're promoting violence. Halo, which is now has a movie coming out, killing something, right? Okay, Mario Kart, not so bad. You're driving around and you're trying to get coins. Okay, so there are levels, and we're gonna talk about that in a second, of the types of screen time. But if kids are exposed to the violent stuff, and even some kids shows will have some sort of violent stuff, where I've noticed on YouTube, specifically with my daughter, who's 8, every once in a while, her YouTube's kind of locked down, which, by the way, you can do. You can set parental controls on YouTube, both the YouTube that you can get through your television or the one that they might get through like a smart device. You can lock it down. And when you do that, they can only get certain things. Okay, great. So I noticed with my daughter, she got on YouTube. It's a little bit locked down, but she still gets these YouTube channel, and some of you might know this. It's like a father and his daughter, and she's like a gymnast slash cheerleader. And at first, the videos were all around like her doing competitions or meeting other gymnasts to do competitions against each other, which I was like, okay, that's harmless. How cute. My daughter likes gymnastics. Great. She's watching other gymnasts. She's watching them do this stuff really, really well. Cool. Well, then the father and daughter, like the daughter got a little bit older and she started, you know, doing things behind her dad's back or playing pranks on her dad, which doesn't seem inherently bad. And I'm thinking, okay, well, no one's hurting anybody else. And then I thought about it, and then we noticed our daughter started to not tell us. She would like sneak an extra snack, before dinner, and she would try not to tell us about it. She didn't used to hide those things from us. We realized the last episode she had watched of that YouTube channel was the daughter doing things behind her father's back to see if she could get away with it. And the whole thing for the YouTube video is like, oh, is dad going to find out? Who knows? Well, my daughter started mimicking this behavior of a 13, 14-year-old, and she's 8. So even point being, even seemingly, benign YouTube videos sometimes can have impacts. And if you let your kid watch YouTube, which I do, right? I started giving her the YouTube to get like how to draw cute little animal videos. And then I walked away. And then she found other videos like this gymnastics video series or these other things that weren't so benign. So anyway, it can spiral, is I guess my point. Um, so other things to look out for, these videos can impair academic performance for several reasons. We talked about the attention span going down. So when your kid's attention span goes on down, it's because they don't have to fight for what they want. So if you remember school, or for some of you that might still be in school, learning stuff is hard and it takes work. So we just give up when something's hard, right? Then we don't learn as much. And this is happening with kids that are on screens all the time. Life feels hard. I see it in my office with people that get depressed or anxious that were kind of used to this screen life and they don't want to put in the work to get better. And there are really clear ways to help them get better. And they're like, yeah, I don't feel like doing that. I just play video games all day. And then they complain about being lonely, but they play video games all day. Um, and they complain that they don't have any other hobbies because they just play video games all day, or they watch YouTube, or they watch whatever else, right? But they don't go out and get any social interaction. So when they go out and get social interaction, they don't know how to interact with people. One, two, the interaction they have over the screen is safer and not as intense. So they stay there and they don't get the interaction that they need to have a healthy life, right? We need to have real friends that support us through real hard times, that are there for us when we need them. There's a lot of research around having a really close network of friends, and having a friend that maybe you play video games with. Every once in a while, there might be that unicorn that can go beyond, above and beyond just playing video games with you, but the chances that they're going to support you through really hard times, losing a job, losing a loved one, um, you know, losing a partner, right? Going through a divorce, these things that are really hard, going through, and I could name 1,000 other hard things. Um, Chances are that your video game friend isn't going to be the one that's going to be there for you, that's going to bring you food, that's going to help you get out of the house, that's going to do all those things. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of kids that spend a lot of time on screens, that's their social interaction. And it keeps them from finding other hobbies. Remember, I was talking about the kid that gets kicked off the screen. They're like, oh, I guess I'll go outside and shoot hoops, or they go in the woods, or they go to a park, or they color, or they start drawing. It's amazing. When my daughter doesn't have a screen, she creates amazing artwork. And it's really sweet. And she's super thoughtful and she makes cards for people. When I allow her to have a screen, she does none of that. And it sticks with her for hours after. Even when I take the screen away, she doesn't want to do any of that creative stuff anymore. So it actually takes away from creativity. Uh, Lack of conflict resolution skills. On a screen, like we talked about before, even if, in the video game you can die, you can respawn or start the game over. There's not really any serious conflict resolution. Uh, you're not really dealing with the stuff that you're gonna have to deal with. And so, not being able to interact with real humans, just getting on a screen, seeing other people deal with conflict. I mean, think about how many different shows you watch where they deal with conflict, and their way to deal with it is to take out a gun or a sword or something like that. And they go through this massive fight, and then, I mean, they're upset, but there's not really the same level of uh, intensity that you would have if it were real life, right? Um, so if I haven't fully scared you by now, there it is. These are the negative impacts of screens. So there are lots of ways to counter this, and there are lots of things that I want to talk about the guidelines for screen time for your kids. A lot of you might be thinking about that. Okay, well, screens are bad, but like what's my limit, right? So I'm gonna bring sleep back in because screens really impact sleep. Basic guidelines for screens are no more than 2 hours a day for the average kid. And what you're seeing in this chart here is the tealish lines or how much sleep you need to get based on your age. So for less than one, they need to get, way over 12 hours of sleep. And I had to kind of create an average there because, they'll say it's between 12 and 14 hours or 11 and 14 hours or whatever. So if you're wondering how much screen time, that's the orange reddish here. So, and this is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. So for the American Academy of Pediatrics, they suggest no one under 2 years old, anyone under 2 years old or anyone under one shouldn't have any screen time. And this isn't just screens that they are directly staring at. These are screens that they're in the room with. I know this is hard, parents. You're holding your infant and there's a TV. Okay, fine. Just try not to turn your infant around and have them stare at the screen. Well, and I know it's hard. And this is all, again, no judgment. I'm just giving you the data, and we all do the best that we can with what we have. So the recommendations are for kids under two, no screen time, unless it's absolutely necessary, right? Like doing a video conferencing with grandma and grandpa because they're halfway around the world. Okay, fine, right? That's something that's creating a connection with a social human that has probably more inherent benefits than negative. So that's fine. Watching, and I don't know all the latest TV shows, so I'm sorry, but like some violent TV show with your infant is probably not a good choice. Okay, so 2 to 5, no more than 1 hour a day of screen time for your child from 2 to 5, right? So we're seeing like 1 to 2, it's like 0.5, 3 to 5, right? We're still under 2 hours of screen time. And at these ages, this is screen time with an adult in the room and you're co-viewing, right? So this isn't a kid getting a lot of screen time on their own, or it's you've locked down what they're able to see. Okay. So in general, screen time is limited to no more than 2 hours a day at max. So even 17 plus as adults, I know we sit on a computer screen all day. So when you go home, don't get back on your screen. Go for a walk in the woods. Go to the gym and don't stare at the TV while you're running on the treadmill. Just run or get in the pool or spin with nothing else around. Um, Try to get away from the screen. If you can't, right? If that's just part of your life, make sure that you get off a screen. I suggest, so I say 30 to 60 minutes. For most of the adults that I'm dealing with that have sleep issues, I tell them turn off your screens an hour before you are getting into bed and trying to go to sleep. An hour. Just 1 hour a day, folks. You all can do it. Okay. One way I suggest to do that for families, create a family space where they can plug in their devices, probably like in the kitchen, the mudroom, like by the front door somewhere. Plug in all your devices there. That's where they stay for the night. Everyone plugs them in. Everyone goes upstairs or to their bedrooms, upstairs, same floor, whatever. Everyone goes to their bedrooms. not having that in their bedroom is huge. Okay, especially for kids, because they don't have the impulse control that adults do, or supposedly. Okay. For adults, if you have tied your alarm clock to your screen, okay, at least put the alarm on, plug it in on the other side of the room or in your bathroom. Plug it in and turn the volume up and let the alarm go off far enough away that when it goes off, you're forced to get out of bed and go get it. And if you wake up in the middle of the night, you don't have it right by your bed to just grab and start scrolling because you're not going to go right back to bed if you do that. Okay. So less than 2 hours is the required, and they do say that less than 2 hours, excluding school time, screen time. So if the kids have to get on the screens for schoolwork, that's fine. But really trying to reduce it. I know it's hard for teens. I get it. Adolescents, they're on their phones all the time. There are some ways to combat that. I'm going to talk about that next. So, healthy ways to deal with screens. So, the first is watch the screen alongside with your child. So, for younger kids, watch alongside with them and talk about what you're viewing. Okay. I have found the Discovery Channel to be amazing, and the History Channel, believe it or not. There are some really cool shows. I love the Discovery Channel because of things like Blue Ocean or Blue Planet or whatever it is. And even the one with Helmsworth about he does all these intense activities. We talk about it and they talk about the science behind it. It gets my kids excited about science. I'm fine with, that's fine. Try and stay within the window of what the screen time's for. But if you're talking to your kids about it, they're learning something from it, then they're getting something out of it. And that can be a healthy way to watch the screen, right? So select high quality interactive educational content. Um, Try to stay away from commercials. Commercials are meant to sell the demographic they're towards. So if it's a kids show, it's going to be selling candy and toys. If it's an adult show, it's going to be selling alcohol and other things like that, right? Um, Set limits. Remember, most of the time these devices are under your control, and almost all devices now, whether you do it through your internet provider, like a Verizon, you can set limits per device on their website. You can, if it's through your cellular provider, you can set limits or you can control or block content. Um, School computers generally are already blocked for a lot of stuff. You can block and set limits. Most video game consoles have limits set to them where they have to get a code. My son has a code on his, and yes, I do type in the code sometime and let him to continue. Mostly when we're doing things like we're going to be in a car for many, many hours, and I'm okay with him watching the screen because he's going to be stuck sitting anyway. But once his time's up, maybe I extend his time or I let him off the hook once or twice, but then I don't. I'm like, hey, you're gonna have to sleep or read. So set limits, stick to them as much as you can. Lead by example. Telling your kid that they can't get on a screen and then jumping on your smartphone and scrolling through YouTube or TikTok, probably not your best move. That's going to seem really hypocritical. And yes, you're going to feel like you do it, but I guarantee you, if you lead by example, you're going to feel better too. Um, and you're going to make better choices. Again, monitoring, the media, and we talked about, what you can block or limit. Like I said, YouTube has limits that you can set. Um, Being consistent and instilling good habits. So you can actually schedule or create rooms in the house where there are no screens. There can be a day where it's like screen-free Sunday, where, they're not in school, so they don't need to be on their screen. They've had all Saturday to get their homework done if they had homework over the weekend. So on Sundays, it's screen-free. Plan to go on a hike or get out of the house, go bowling or whatever. Whatever you do, go to, the grandparents' house, go to a friend's house, somewhere where they're forced to do something off of a screen, and make it a day where they're never allowed to be on a screen that day. Or make rooms in your house that are screen free. Maybe the kitchen is a screen free room. That's where you eat dinner and you talk. Maybe the bedrooms. For me in my house, bedrooms are screen free. We don't have screens in the bedroom because it's a place for sleep. So I've stuck to that. I've known a lot of people that don't know how to deal with that because they grew up with a TV in their room, but you can figure out your best balance. The bottom line is that everyone has their own, I can tell you what the standards are, right? And what, medical professionals, pediatricians suggest for kids, what doctors suggest for adults. I can tell you all the research in the world. You're going to have to figure out what your best compromise is or what your limits that you can set. And after you figure that out, consistency is key. The more consistent you are, the less frustrated you and your child will be because you've set really clear boundaries that your kid knows they can't cross because there'll be consequences and you know you can't cross. And that helps the both of you. You're playing by the same set of rules. So you model that behavior that you want to see in your kids with screens. Um, and reminding your kids that screen time, especially the for fun social media type screen time, not the screen time they need to do their homework, but the rest of that screen time, it's a privilege. It's not a right, right? We don't have a right to screen time. Um, Kids need to eat, they need to sleep, they need to exercise. They don't need to be on the screen. I remind you of that. I know it's the easiest thing sometimes. And it's, sometimes we need it for our sanity. Um, I often ask, like, when you are at wit's end and you do it that one time, maybe check in with yourself. And I've done this so many times. What do I need to do to recover myself, to de-stress myself, so that when that happens to my kid again, I am better able to handle that? And sometimes it requires maybe a day or a weekend of listening to your kid cry and throw tantrums all weekend to get through it. For those of you that have been through potty training, you know what that's like. You have to get through it, but no one wants to do diapers forever. So guess what? You push through that weekend or those few weeks of potty training because you know you have to do it. This really isn't any different. Okay. Um, so just be conscious that again, screens are a privilege, they're not a right. And also don't make screens the enemy. Like we talked about before, there could be really healthy screen time. There's something really cool, like maybe I kind of geek out on mostly British history, honestly. And there are some stuff. There's one on American history not too long ago about John Adams. It was so cool. And I realized like there wasn't a lot of like sex and violence in it. I was like, okay, this is something I can show my kids. I showed it to them. I got to watch something I wanted to watch. My kids got to watch it, turn it off. And then we would talk about the history of colonial America and what that was all about and what they were talking about. It was a really cool conversation, and my kids learned something. So it doesn't always have to be the enemy. Sometimes on a rainy, cold day, where getting on doing Just Dance on your kids video, right, and you all get up and you dance, you're getting exercise. It's a screen, but at least you're getting exercise. So there's a happy medium there. Or maybe you're all exhausted and you all do Mario Kart or you play a game together. You're at least getting that quality time with your kid. What I highly suggest is what you want to stay away from is every person in your house is on a different screen doing a different thing in their own world. You know what? You don't get that time back with your kids. There's a limited amount of time that we have with our kids where they're home, they're with us, and they want to connect with us, and then it's gone. So while you have it, instead of being on your phone doing your thing, put your phone down. Jump on their screen with them and do something with them. Even though it might not be your favorite thing. I hate Peppa Pig and a million other kid cartoons, but every once in a while I watch them with my kid so we could talk about whatever they were talking about, much to my dismay. But it worked, and my kid recognized that I was interested in them and what they were interested in, and that went miles for them. Lastly, pay attention to sleep and mood. If your child's struggling sleeping, check in when they're getting off their screen. I've heard from school counselors that kids come in tired, and then we're finding out that parents are they're handing them the screen and saying good night. That's not a good model. Your kid's going to sit on that screen for a lot longer than they need to. Imagine if you handed your kid, a cooler filled with ice cream and candy and said, okay, good night. What's your kid going to do? They're going to open up that cooler, they're going to eat ice cream and candy until they feel sick and they pass out. That's exactly what they're going to do with the screen, too. Not the best model for health, right? So think about that screen. It's like a giant vat of ice cream and candy. And it's not something you want to be handing your kid and walking away from, right? So pay attention to sleep and mood. If they're not getting a lot of sleep, double check that they're not. My daughter snuck her iPad into her room. I have to pay attention to that now. I make sure that everything's plugged into our technology station before we all go to bed, my own phone included. And mood. If your kid is particularly moody, again, double check and check in with how much time they're spending on a screen. You might be surprised that maybe it was over the holiday and they were on the screen a lot more, and you were lenient with sleep time and all these other things, and it built up, and now they're moody and tough to deal with. We're all there. Just double check, because when we get moody and they get moody, then we get in fights with our kids that we don't really want to have happen, and that's no fun for anyone. So that's what I have for tonight. That was screen time. I hope the facts were helpful. I hope the content that I shared about what I've been through with screens and with kids myself was helpful. I hope that you all enjoyed tonight's session, and that I will see you all again next week for another session of parenting and mental health. Again, I remind you, if you have any topics you really want to cover, please post them on our Facebook page. This video will go up in a little bit. Have a great night. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. And I'll see you again next week.